Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle, and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? The next step. Tristan stirred the sickly green tea in his mug, watching the bag bob up and down in murky suspension. He took a sip, cringed, and grunted in disgust. Far from being satisfying, he thought it tasted like wet grass and regret. He sighed and left the break room, entering the office corridor and pressing the elevator button with the same tired resignation he'd applied to his third cup that morning. The mirrored elevator doors reflected a man worn thin, tired eyes, and a mouth set in a permanent downturn. He tried not to look at the strands of premature gray creeping over his ears. He took another sip of his matcha, forcing himself to swallow, trying not to think of how closely the drink resembled something he once scraped off the wheels of his lawnmower. Sighing heavily, Tristan glanced at his watch. He'd had back-to-back meetings all morning and hadn't felt needed for any of them, having so far only sat silently, taking notes and nodding as higher-ups talked in circles for an hour while ultimately saying nothing. Just a few more years, he reminded himself for the millionth time. A few more years proving yourself, then you'll be promoted to manager, then director, then you'll have made it. He took another sip of matcha and grimaced, struggling between forcing himself to swallow or spitting it out. It was a few moments before he noticed the old man who had come to stand beside him, waiting for the elevator. The old man looked sideways at Tristan and grinned. Just switched to tea, eh? Tristan forced himself to finally swallow and nodded. Yeah. The old man chuckled and said, "That look on your face, oof, you're a coffee guy, am I right?" Tristan examined the old man's face. He was ancient, likely pushing 90. But he wasn't a senior executive or even on the board. Tristan had memorized all their faces. Not really in the mood to make small talk with some random old guy, Tristan just nodded. "Thought so," the old man continued conversationally. "Let me guess, it wasn't your idea." Tristan frowned down at the tea in his hand and said, "My girlfriend suggested it." "Ah, another young pup, just doing as he's told." The old man chuckled again. "It's a shame you don't know how to think for yourself." Tristan bristled slightly at the remark, but didn't want to cause a scene at work by telling this guy off. So he forced himself to remain silent by drinking more matcha. The old man looked sideways at him and shook his head in disappointment. "Nothing? Pity. I hoped you had more spine than that." Tristan turned to face the man, his brows pressing together as he clenched a fist. "What's your problem?" Tristan demanded angrily. The old man laughed. "That's more like it. I knew there was still someone alive in there." The old man poked Tristan in the chest and laughed again. Tristan sneered and turned back to the elevator, wondering just what the hell was taking the damn thing so long. "You'll be waiting a long time if you just stand here," the old man said. "Feel free to take the stairs," Tristan snapped. I don't mean the elevator, kid, the old man said, suddenly serious. Your goals, your dreams. I assume you have some. Let me tell you, no one ever got anywhere by just waiting. You gotta find it yourself. Yeah, well, no one's told me where else to look yet, so... Tristan replied coldly. And you're just waiting to be told, eh? Want the world to just hand you everything you want? That's the problem with you kids. You think your dreams just come true on their own? Tristan exhaled sharply, having had enough of being lectured by a stranger of no importance. He opened his mouth, ready to tell the old guy exactly what he thought. Then something was pressed into his chest. A folded sheet of paper, bronzed by time. Lucky for you, kid, the old man whispered conspiratorially. That's exactly how your world works today. What is this? Tristan asked suspiciously, his anger suddenly replaced with confusion. He carefully peeled back a corner of the folded paper. It looked like trash to him. He wondered if the old man was simply crazy. That, young blood, is a map, the old man said, pointing at the paper. A map to a priceless reward. I can tell by looking at you that you're not where you want to be in life. You follow that map, and your life will be forever changed. This is a joke, right? Tristan asked. You're giving me a treasure map? What is this, Uncharted? It's okay, young blood. The old man grinned. I didn't believe at first either, when a stranger handed me that thing. It took me 37 years to take it seriously. Wasted a lot of time. But if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have hesitated for a second. The intense sincerity with which the man spoke made Tristan uneasy, but at the same time he had felt a rush of excitement course through him. Even if the man was crazy, this was the most interesting thing that had ever happened to him, so why not play along? Okay then, Tristan began, slowly unfolding the supposed map, deciding to humor the man for now. What's this reward? And why didn't you take it yourself? No, boy, I did take it, the old man insisted. Everyone gets their own reward. That map you're holding will guide you to a place that exists on no other map. From there, it will show you the way through the maze. Maze? Tristan repeated, still not sure if he should be taking this seriously or not. Yes, or a labyrinth more like. The map will lead you to the center, where you can claim your personal reward. But there's a condition to claim it. You have to pay it forward. Tristan stared down at the map in his hands. It was so fragile, worn thin, and creased with countless folds. It felt like it was going to crumble to dust in his hands. The old man turned and began walking away, just as the elevator dinged to announce its arrival. What you do next is up to you, but take some free advice. Don't waste half your life wondering about it. Over the following days, Tristan kept telling himself the old man was crazy. A treasure map? Ridiculous. But a part of him was intrigued, even more so when he asked around the office for the old man, and no one seemed to have ever seen him. He couldn't really explain why he decided to listen to the old man in the end, but Tristan left his home and began his search. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He took all the vacation days he had, then took off. After weeks of travel, all doubts about the map vanished as he found the place it led to. Tristan stood in a forgotten valley as the sun began to fall behind the horizon, looking in awe at the towering dark walls before him. They stretched infinitely to the left and right of where he stood, fading into the dwindling light in the distance and even stretching into the darkening sky. An archway towered over Tristan, a gaping mouth that marked the entrance to this place. Tristan almost expected lightning to split the sky. How could this monolith go undiscovered? Who had built it and why? These questions and countless more swirled around Tristan's mind like a hurricane, but they didn't matter. Not when he was this close. He had doubted that this whole adventure would lead to anything, but there was no denying it now. Tristan turned the map over in his hands, searching the back and the corners for what to do next. But there was nothing. The old man had told him the map would also guide him to the center of the labyrinth, but Tristan saw nothing that would help him the rest of the way. "Find me," a voice suddenly whispered in the wind. Tristan jumped so much he nearly tore the map in half. He turned on the spot and searched for whoever had spoken, but he was in an empty field. There wasn't another person in sight. "Find me," the voice whispered again, more urgently this time. Tristan turned again as he realized where the voice was coming from. It was speaking from within the labyrinth, a voice born on the wind that breathed out of the labyrinth's depths. Swallowing his nerves, Tristan took a hesitant step into the labyrinth. The world exhaled. Everything fell silent. Glancing over his shoulder, Tristan's face paled in an instant. The massive archway he had just stepped through had vanished. Instead, he was staring at a section of wall made of flat, dark stones that towered overhead, disappearing into the sky. Tristan stumbled forward and pressed his hand against the wall, pressing hard and breathing fast. "No, no, no, no," Tristan muttered in a panic as he felt all around the wall, looking for a way to get back out, but to no avail. After a few minutes of fruitless efforts, Tristan sat down in the dirt with his back against the wall, wondering what he should do now. He took several slow, deep breaths and managed to ease his sense of panic. As he calmed down, he began to examine the area around him. There were 3 paths, leading left, right, and directly ahead of him. Each one stretched into shadows. Tristan looked down at the useless map in his hands. To his shock, the map had changed. The instructions that had been there, that had led him to the labyrinth's entrance, had gone. Now there was a detailed drawing of the labyrinth itself. As Tristan watched, he saw that the illustration was still growing, the black lines spreading as though sketched by numerous invisible hands. As Tristan watched in awe, the black ink filled the page until the full labyrinth was drawn out, an intricate spider's web with a large empty square at its center. "Find me," the voice whispered once more. It sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. Tristan swallowed hard as he tried to wrap his head around what was happening, then nodded once as if he just convinced himself to continue. The map clearly marked the center of the labyrinth, and Tristan noticed tiny dots following the path to his left. Without another moment of hesitation, Tristan turned and followed the directions, moving quickly, but cautiously, into the hidden depths. As Tristan followed the map's instructions, he heard the grinding of stones frequently, and could swear that whenever he looked at the map, it had changed slightly. There was no way of knowing what the other halls contained, but he could hear things lurking in darkness, stomping and slithering out of sight. He was certain they could hear him too, maybe even smell him. He didn't want to think about what would happen if he wandered down the wrong path. There came a point, after hours of wandering, where Tristan's path split into 2 corridors. The map clearly told him to go right, but Tristan felt a strong pull to go left instead. He had no idea what was down that path. He had no reason to veer off the safe route and pursue whatever was down that way, but the desire was almost overwhelming. He took a single step to the left, staring wistfully into the darkness. "There's something incredible down there," he thought. Whatever strange force was calling to him felt as familiar as going home after a long time away. It called to him, Not in words, but in a way he could feel, like a thought he didn't remember having, a memory he'd never lived. But it was as dark as any other path, and utterly, deathly, silent. Despite this, Tristan could almost swear the air felt warmer down that path. Tristan took another step forward, dreaming of what wonders might be that way. "Find me," the voice whispered again, louder. Tristan snapped out of his dreamlike state. He turned and hurried along the path the map told him to go, already forgetting about the alluring alternative route that had called to him. Tristan lost track of how long he had been walking, though it felt like days. He rounded another bend and saw the infinitely large hall widen, revealing a bright silver light. Tristan gasped slightly as he realized this was the center of the labyrinth. He'd made it. Stumbling forward, Tristan fell to his knees on the grass before a raised platform that marked the center of the maze. Wiping the sweat from his eyes, Tristan glanced around, taking in his unremarkable surroundings. The only thing in the courtyard to see was the platform in front of him and the tall, shining object standing atop it. The light seemed to emanate from the object itself. It had an ornate frame made of silver, which twinkled enticingly. The frame held a simple, full-length mirror. Tristan stared up at the mirror with growing confusion. Was this it? This was the prize? "Find me," the voice whispered again suddenly, this time with much more insistence. Tristan flinched at the sound, as it was louder than ever before, and it sounded as if it came from the mirror. This time, now he was so close, Tristan recognized the voice. It was his own, speaking out of the mirror with urgency. The hairs on his arms and the back of his neck stood on end as Tristan stared with wide eyes at the mirror. The surface seemed to shimmer like a small pond, reflecting the light of a full moon. Tristan slowly moved closer, unblinking as he climbed onto the stone platform and stepped in front of the mirror. When he looked at his reflection, Tristan gasped. Where his reflection should have been, there was instead a strange yet familiar face. The old man from the office, who had encouraged Tristan on this adventure, stood in the mirror, looking out at Tristan with a hard and hungry gaze. "Hey, young blood, you found me," the old man said with a grin. He spoke with Tristan's voice. "What? How?" Tristan stammered. What's happening?" Tristan suddenly felt an ice-cold sensation grip his chest. He gasped from the shock of it and clutched a hand to his heart as he stumbled, almost falling to his knees. Glancing up, he saw the old man in the mirror begin to change. His white hair began to fill with color, becoming light brown and thick. The wrinkles on his face began to fade, and his skin became smooth. Tristan looked down at his hands, and his breath caught in his throat. His skin was shriveling before his eyes, the color draining fast, his fingers curling like brittle twigs. His veins pressed against thin and papery skin, his hands weak and trembling. "Help!" Tristan croaked, looking up at the old man in the mirror. But the old man didn't look old anymore. As Tristan stared, finally falling to his knees as his legs suddenly became too frail, he saw that the old man had become more youthful in only moments, becoming decades younger. What truly horrified Tristan, though, was the old man's new youthful face. It was his own. Tristan reached up and touched his face with trembling fingers. He felt his cheeks had hollowed out, and the skin around his neck and jawline seemed to hang loose from his bones. "Sorry, young blood," the man in the mirror said with Tristan's voice, now wearing Tristan's face. "You should have looked for yourself. The road not taken, am I right?" Tristan felt a sudden invisible force begin to pull him towards the mirror. He screamed and clawed at the stone platform beneath him, trying desperately to find something to grab hold of. Tristan felt himself being dragged towards the mirror, and he screamed even louder, his eyes bulging out of his suddenly ancient face. He tried to crawl away, but the invisible force was too strong, and his now aged body too weak. Looking back, Tristan stared in horror as his feet touched the mirror, but instead of hitting glass, they simply vanished inside, as if he had sunk his feet into a dark ocean. Screaming even louder, Tristan thrashed and tried to pull himself free. He desperately tried to grab hold of something. He dug his fingers into any crack in the stones he could find. His fingernails snapped off as he was dragged with irresistible force, leaving thin trails of blood on the stone as he continued to claw for help. The man in the mirror, who now looked exactly like Tristan had, watched as Tristan slowly sank into the mirror. Tristan screamed the whole while, thrashing and clawing at the ground as first he sank into the mirror up to his knees, then his waist. Tristan still screamed and flailed when he was in up to his chest. Finally, the screaming stopped as Tristan's head vanished into the mirror, though one hand still protruded through the mirror, bloody and frail, searching wildly for something to grab onto, until even that had gone. Once the labyrinth's courtyard was silent once more, the man who had taken Tristan's visage pressed his hands on his side of the mirror and pushed, emerging easily from the mirror and stepping out into the cool air. He turned around and looked back into the mirror, admiring his reflection. With a smirk, the man smoothed out his new hair. He then looked down at the ground and saw the ancient map. With a grin, the man reached down and picked it up and tucked it into his jacket pocket. Then he turned and walked away, whistling casually as he vanished into the darkness. Summer 1992. 7th cup. The tea still works, even though it shifts and alters more than it should. My skin is tighter. I feel it around my chin and my collarbones, but it takes curious forms here and there, either too smooth or too sharp. The first time it happened, I barely noticed. I was blinded by relief, youth. I don't recognize my own reflection anymore. Now my patience wears thin where it once stretched long. My thoughts move too quickly, and my moods shift without warning. The hours of morning I used to cherish agitate me. It's like I'm trapped in time, not freed from it. Next time I'll use more leaves, just to make sure. The walls were covered with vines that followed the delicate pattern of bricks, seeping through gaps in the mortar and peeking inside like intruders. The house stood like a forgotten relic, with its green tapestry of tendrils creeping along the windowsills, curling around the hinges and swaying gently in the breeze. Some vines had grown so thick they formed a canopy over the sagging porch, casting shifting shadows on the creaking wooden floors. On the side, the chimney peeked out from the greenery, barely visible beneath the stubborn embrace of ivy. It was a house where nature had reclaimed its place, where the edges of time were blurred and cloudy. At the start of spring, the lilies flowered, and through the door left ajar you could see a bouquet placed carefully on the table. If you turned right, through the air that carried the earthy scents of the vines, you would find yourself in the parlor, where furniture sat like forgotten ghosts of another era. An armchair draped with quilt, a table so old its scratches looked like wrinkles, books with cracked spines and yellowed pages scattered across a shelf leaning slightly to one side. Moss clung to the edges of the fireplace. From here, you'd go through one of the two doors and end up in either the bedroom or the kitchen. The bed, centered in the middle of the room, had chipped paint coming off its iron frame. The blend of abandonment and charm that was the kitchen had mismatched jars of spices and dried herbs lined on shelves, and next to the sink, a cast iron kettle that rested on a stove, pulsing with a strange vitality. Its lid always seemed to breathe with soft metallic sighs, an ancient creature that seemed to know every secret whispered within the house. This altered slice of forest belonged entirely to Dorothy, an old lady whose only company was the house itself. Dorothy had lived there for as long as anyone could remember, a quiet but constant presence on the edge of the world. Her wiry frame, draped in shawls, moved slowly through the vine-covered walls, her hands always stained with the green of crushed herbs or brewed teas. Depending on who told the story, she might have been a herbalist, a healer, or even a witch. But for those who didn't like to indulge in the grasps of fiction, she was just a lonely old woman. The solace she found in nature helped her cope with the sadness and grief brought by age. Her thoughts often spiraled into the past, replaying moments from her youth that were long gone. The forest became her refuge, a place where her grief felt less sharp, where she could lose herself in the rustling of leaves overhead. It made her feel small in the most comforting sense, like a child again, cradled by something much larger than herself. Each time she was surrounded by the vibrant green and the hum of insects, she felt life and youth pumping through her veins. It made something inside her ache, deep and primal. It was as if she wanted to consume the forest whole, swallow its wildness and vitality, and fill the hollow place within her that grief had carved. In this warm embrace, she could almost forget all the heaviness she carried. Almost. April 23rd, 1952. First cup. I don't know what to expect. Perhaps a little more energy, an ease in my joints. I can see the plant standing outside my window, unfazed, as if didn't just surrender something so life-changing to me. I don't expect miracles, because that would be foolish. If I wake up tomorrow and feel the way I did 10 years ago, even 5. Dorothy was at that age when even the slightest noise troubled her sleep. So when she heard the soft, almost rhythmic rustling, she got up immediately. It wasn't the sharp sound of wind, nor the familiar clattering of branches or leaves carried on the breeze. She stretched, her eyes still heavy with sleep, and gazed out through a gap in the curtains. There, growing just outside the window, was a plant nestled against the weathered stone wall, claiming the place as if it had always belonged. Except it didn't, the old woman thought. Its presence felt almost magical, with white blossoms that stood out like tiny stars, delicate and almost too perfect. Dorothy got her shawl and went outside to get a better look. The closer she stepped, the quicker her heart beat. She knelt down, her fingers brushing the leaves lightly. The plant had a quiet elegance and an earthy scent so familiar, she almost didn't notice the subtle, sweet fragrance that lingered in the breeze. The plant seemed to hum with life beneath her touch. It called to her. Was it a gift? An omen? As Dorothy pulled her hand away from the plant, she felt an odd, sudden shift. Something within her had been gently untangled. She looked down at her palm, and, instead of the familiar creases that had accumulated over the years, she saw skin so smooth, almost unmarked, as if just that part of her body had slipped away in time. The wrinkles, the evidence of age that had clung to her like a malady for so long, had vanished, replaced by the soft texture that she hadn't known in decades. In the stillness of night, Dorothy couldn't help but wonder, had the plant done more than just grow? Had it reached into her and drawn something out, something almost rotten? And if yes, could it do it again? A strange surge of impulse swept over her. She reached toward one of its thick, twisting branches, curled her fingers around it, and, with a sudden determination and strength, snapped it off. The leaves rustled in protest, but the plant itself made no other sound, no objection, no struggle. Start off by boiling the water, 4 cups over medium-high heat, which you then pour over about 1 tablespoon of leaves and steep to the desired strength before straining. The quantity of leaves influences the end result. Taste, smell, years turned back, so beware. Add sugar, if needed, and stir until completely dissolved. Pour into a cup and drink. She set the teapot on the table and rested her hands on the worn surface. The silence in the room seemed to stretch, as though the whole house was holding its breath. When she poured the hot liquid into her cup, the smell was sweet and inviting. Before lifting the cup to her lips, she let her gaze drift back to the smooth skin of her palm. It seemed impossible, and for a second, she thought it might all be a dream, a mirage created by her sleeping self. But there it was again, the freshness of youth staring back at her, all too real. As she took her first slow sip, the light of dawn crept through the curtains, casting a pale golden glow across the room. A ray of sunlight slipped past the table, past the jars with their faded labels covered in a layer of dust, and kissed the edge of the cup. After downing its contents, Dorothy couldn't help but smile. Years passed. The world shifted and reshaped itself. Time had forgiven nobody. It shed its old skin and kept emerging in a new form, always moving forward. Seasons marked their passing in the slow dance between life, death, and rebirth. The forest stirred from its slumber each spring, deepened its song in summer, caught its breath in autumn, and went to sleep at last, in winter. Outside Dorothy's house, the plant stood tall, its leaves shimmering in the sunlight, vibrant and green. It didn't wither in the cold or droop in the heat, and while the trees around it shed their leaves, the plant turned a deeper shade of green, as if to mock the cycle of decay that governed everything else. Something so human, so terrestrial, this idea of age, was never a threat to its well-being. Dorothy had witnessed these changes through both joy and sorrow. She was always there, a still point in a spinning universe. Each time she plucked a fresh leaf, she felt a rush of vitality fill her, the years peeling away from her skin. Her reflection showed a face far younger than she had any right to possess. 1 cup, 2 cups, 3, 20, 100. It was easy to lose track of time. The cycle of day and night became meaningless. Days and hours and minutes were nothing compared to the eternity locked behind her eyes. Instead, Dorothy would measure the passing of time by watching the plant diminish before her eyes, wondering how long it had left before turning into withered twigs. Would it one day simply stop growing altogether? Would she steal its essence until they both shrank, one no longer thriving at the other's expense? 132nd cup. I used to think highly of the plant, how time doesn't affect its leaves or flowers, but I'm not so sure anymore. The tea makes my stomach turn. I drink it anyway. What's the alternative? But every sip feels like a chore. I miss the sweet taste it once had. I don't even want to think about the possibility of it dying. Maybe it already is, and I just don't let myself see. The earth beneath Dorothy's feet was dry and cracked, reflecting nothing but decay. Around her, the world was lifeless. Even the birds, creatures that had once filled the mornings with their song, had long since vanished. Only silence remained. At the center of this desolation stood the plant, at least what was left of it. Its branches were brittle and twisted, no longer covered by the lush leaves that had once crowned it in green splendor. Dorothy knelt before it one last time, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch the withered frame. She could feel it, the final breath of life, and she knew, in the ache of her bones, in the faint lines that had begun to reappear on her hands yet again, that this would be all over at last. Time, it seemed, had finally caught up to her, and yet she couldn't resist taking this one more gift. Carefully, she plucked the final few leaves from the plant's skeletal frame, thin and fragile like paper soaked in water. In the kitchen, she lit the fire and set the battered kettle on the stove. The water boiled slowly, keeping the moment alive for just a while longer, this last ritual that she was unwilling to let go of. She dropped the leaves into the cup, watching as they unfurled, filling the air with the earthy scent tinged with a faint bitterness she couldn't recall. It smelled of death. She carried the cup back to the garden, standing among the ruins of her once vibrant wood, the plant motionless behind her. She hesitated for a moment before raising the cup to her lips and drinking slowly. The warmth spread through her body, but the feeling was different this time. Heavier, less vibrant. Her hands did not change. The lines on her face remained. The tea had nothing left to give. Behind her, the plant made a soft, cracking sound, and when she turned, she saw it collapse in on itself. Its branches curled inward. Its roots shrank, pulling away from the earth until there was nothing left but a blackened patch of soil. It was gone, completely gone. As Dorothy stood in the silent, dead garden, she felt a strange sensation stir within her chest, faint at first, and then growing stronger, deeper, spreading through her body like the vines on the house. When she clutched her arms, panic rising in her throat, she felt her skin softening, thinning, veins emerging beneath the surface like the ridges of a leaf. Her legs trembled, and she fell to her knees, the cracked earth beneath pressing into her bones. She couldn't rise back up no matter how hard she tried. She was shrinking, folding into herself, rooting into the soil as if she was being claimed by it. Swallowed. Her hair began to tangle and grow wild, sprouting into long, twisting vines that cascaded down her back and over her shoulders. She wanted to scream, but her words cut off, muffled by the sound of creaking wood emerging from her throat. It was as though the forest was taking back the very life she had drained from the plant over centuries. She had stolen, and now she would give. That was her last thought before her human form erased itself completely. Dorothy stands now, elegant and tall, her branches twisted upward toward the pale sky. She gave up on trying to regain her human beauty, but she mourns it still, while her leaves are swaying gently in the wind. From a distance, she appears flawless, a vibrant plant in contrast to the barren garden. As you get closer, though, you start to notice the rot and ruin on the tips of her leaves, how they curl inwards as if, in their attempt to grow, they lost their strength halfway. They whisper of a decay she cannot escape, no matter how deeply her roots have sunk into the soil. The gates of hell are open night and day, smooth the descent, and easy is the way. Virgil. They all just sat there in the heat, and they waited. The kid came back. He was walking down the platform with his head hung low, sweat running down his pimpled face, like always. He was 16, but looked more like 13, short and skinny, with longish dark hair and a black eye. The black eye was always there. It never faded. He took a seat at the end of the bench with the others and looked down at his dirty old sneakers. Roman. Same shit, little man? The kid. Yeah. Roman, I don't know why you even bother no more. They all just sat there in silence. Sandra, it's so hot today. 3 of them looked at her. Roman, bitch, it's hot out here every day. Sandra, I told you not to call me that. Colonel Duval. Roman, please. Roman gave a tiny chuckle and pulled the pack of Newports from his pocket and lit one up. That pack was always near to full. He exhaled some smoke and looked down the tracks into the distance where the rails slowly bent off into the trees and out of sight. Sandra wrinkled her nose and waved the smoke away. Roman, man, when this train gonna come? Brian, why do you always ask that same question over and over? Roman, yo, man. I already done told you to bite your tongue and stay over there, you strange-ass bitch. Don't make me get up. It's too hot for me to whip your ass right now, you silly-looking motherfucker. They all just sat there in silence. Colette fanned herself with the folded newspaper, looked down the tracks, and then handed it to the colonel, who did the same. Roman took one last drag on his cigarette and then flicked it at Brian seated at the end of the bench, bouncing it off his jeans and leaving a small horsetail of orange sparks in the air as it fell to the platform. Brian did not respond at all. Roman chuckled. The kid, I'm gonna take a walk. Roman, seriously, man? Again? Is you retarded? The kid, fuck off. I'm gonna take a walk. You can come with me if you want. Roman, nah, man. I'm good, shorty. You go off and wander. I'll be cooling it right here when you get back. The kid walked off down the platform towards the exit stairs, giving Roman, or maybe all of them, the finger with his right hand held over his narrow shoulders as he departed, not looking back. As he passed the thermometer mounted on the wall, the temperature read 117 degrees Fahrenheit. Always 117 degrees Fahrenheit. Always. Colette, can someone remind me how he got here? I know he's told me, but I just can't remember. Sandra, me neither. They all just quietly sat there in the heat for a while, Roman looking down the tracks every minute or two. He lit another Newport from the bottomless pack. Colette and Sandra both squinted and waved the smoke away. Brian looked up at the sky. Brian, how come the sun never sets? Colette. Sandra, I forgot how you got here too. I know we've discussed this before, but I just can't seem to remember these things. Sandra, I came home from a business trip early one day and found the car that belongs to my husband's 24-year-old secretary blocking the driveway. When I entered the house, I could immediately hear the sounds coming from the bedroom. I went to the stove and blew out the pilot light and turned up the gas. Then I lit a few candles on the dining room table, left the house, and drove my car halfway down the block and watched as it went up in flames a little while later. It's sad that my baby Jason was there in his crib at the time, but I really didn't want to be a single mother. That was in 1972. What year is this? Colette. Oh, that's right. That's just awful. Roman. Yo, do y'all ever plan to shut the fuck up? Making my head hurt over here. Colonel Duval. Roman. I must politely ask you once again to mind your language when speaking with the women. Roman gave him an angry stare and then flicked his cigarette butt out onto the tracks and used his black bandana to wipe the sweat off his forehead. Brian, are we ever going to get any food? When is the food coming? I'm hungry. Colette, I don't think we can get food here. Sandra. Colette, I forgot how you got here too. What awful thing did you do? Please remind me. Colette gave her an aggrieved stare for a moment, and then revealed a broad smile and answered in a flowery and friendly tone that could not have been less sincere. Colette, I didn't do anything awful, Sandra. Nothing like what you did. Your own child. Unthinkable. No, all I did was fulfill my Lord and Savior's will. When I was working in the hospital, if I saw in a patient's chart that she previously murdered an unborn child, well, I carried out God's will. I did this 6 times before they caught me. I wish it was 6,000. Sandra, I'm an atheist. Colette laughed during her brief reply. Colette, this is probably not the best place for you to cling to that silly notion, dummy. Sandra, go fuck yourself, Colette. They all went silent for a while. The heat was oppressive. There was no shade. There was no breeze. Brian, when are we going to get something to eat? Colonel Duval, son, I've been here far longer than any of you. I assure you, there will be no meals served. Brian, well, we all need water. Will we get some water at some point? The colonel ignored this query. After a while, Roman spoke up. Roman, yo, old man, remind me how you got here. Colonel Duval, I was in the war. At Antietam, we captured some rebel soldiers and we needed information about troop locations, numbers, armaments, that sort of intelligence. We did things to them to ensure that we got that information quickly, but later I was court-martialed and they hanged my commanding officer and myself in Washington for our war crimes. It was quite the scandal at that time. Roman, Antietam? Where that at, man? Iraq? Colonel Duval, no, son, that's in Maryland. Can you please remind me how you got here? I'm sorry. My memory is not what it once was. Roman, shot a few niggas. Colonel Duval, excuse me, son? Can you repeat that? Roman, yeah, I shot a few niggas just down the block from where I stay in Washington Heights. I've been running that corner for 3 years, and one day these little bitches show up and just set up shop and start serving my customers. It wasn't something I had to think about much. Shit. I also hit a delivery man bringing some cases of beer into the bodega on that corner, but I didn't mean to do that. He was just in that wrong place at the wrong time. Then I shot it out with the NYPD. It was pretty quick. I caught a few in my back and one in my neck. Anyways, man, that's how I got here. He pointed at the scar on his neck and then lit another cigarette. The kid was walking back down the platform, his olive drab green U.S. Army t-shirt heavily stained with sweat. The thermometer read 117 degrees Fahrenheit, as always. Sandra, can someone remind me how he got here? I can't seem to remember these things for long, for some reason. Colette, I don't recall either, but I'm sure he didn't burn his child to death. Sandra shot an angry look back at her, scowled and looked away, crossing her arms over her chest. Roman looked down the tracks. Sandra, fuck you, Colette. Colette smiled smugly. Roman, man, when this train gonna come? Sandra, I do feel really bad about my son, Jason. I just didn't know what else to do in that moment. That's why I drove to the bridge afterwards. The kid took a seat at the end of the bench. Sandra, hey kid, I'm sorry. Can you please remind us how you got here? The kid, I took my dad's pistol to school, and I shot a few bullies and this one asshole gym teacher. Then I shot myself. The kid never said very much. Roman, same shit, little man? The kid, yeah, I walked and ended up right back here, just like always. Felt like I was walking for 2 hours. Wish I had my iPhone. How long was I gone that time? Roman. I don't know, man. Maybe 4 or 5 minutes. You see anything new? The kid. Number. It doesn't matter which way I go. It's just a long, empty road, and then I pass by an empty high school that looks just like mine, and then I end up back here. He stared down at his dirty old sneakers. Colette. Maybe next time you should stop in that school and take some geography classes. She laughed at her own joke, and the kid shot her a grave look. Sandra did too. Sandra. Jean-Paul Sartre said, "Hell is other people." I think he was right. Sandra crossed her arms over her chest and looked away. Colette. How did you get here, Brian? Brian. I already told you. I took 17 women between 1985 and 1992 before I was arrested. Mostly prostitutes. Then I was on death row down in Huntsville for about 14 years until I ran out of appeals. Are they going to bring us any food? They all went silent for a while and stewed in the heat of the brutal, unyielding sun. After a few minutes, Roman looked down the tracks. Roman. Man, when this train gonna come? Colonel Duval. I wouldn't be in such a rush, son. Roman. Oh yeah, why dat? Colonel Duval paused and looked at the tracks running off in the opposite direction, towards the desert, before looking back at Roman. Colonel Duval. Well, son, we don't know where that train is going to take us, do we? He paused for another moment and stared off towards the desert again. He spoke without looking back this time. He spoke quietly. Colonel Duval. Maybe this is the best part. What if it only gets worse from here? What if this is just the beginning? Roman lit another cigarette and then turned away and quietly stared in the other direction, down the tracks to the point where the rails bent off and disappeared beyond the trees. He exhaled, and the smoke drifted down the bench towards the others. They all sat there and waited for the train. Eventually, the kid took another walk and then returned a short time later, drenched in sweat. Brian remained hungry. Colette and Sandra refused to look at one another. The colonel had a solemn cast to his face, and Roman continued to reach into his endless pack of cigarettes. The temperature was 117 degrees Fahrenheit. They all just sat there in the heat, and they waited. 28 sleighs. Later, above the laughter and Christmas music, the bang against the door came. Thump, thump, thump. Paul Reyes sighed. He patted his wife's hand and pushed his chair away from the table. Don't worry, love. I've got this one. Rosemary frowned at him. But everybody's here. Who could it be? He stopped. Rose had framed the doorbell with tinsel. You couldn't miss it. It would take a brain-dead person to knock instead of ringing. He shrugged. Carolers or something. I'll give 'em a quid and tell 'em to bugger off. A round of laughter rippled around the table. The playlist swapped over to Wham's Last Christmas. Outside in the front hall, the door shuddered again. Thump, thump, thump. It banged hard enough to make the door vibrate in its frame. Annoyance flickered in his mind. The nerve of some of these charity-begging types. He wasn't one to sniff at donations, but give a man ample time to get up. And don't knock his door down like you're the wolf versus the 3 little pigs. He hurried along in his slippers. I'm coming, I'm coming. Hold your horses." But still, the banging continued. Thump, thump, thump. The little panes of glass at the top of the door vibrated and threatened to shatter. The figure of a man swayed beyond, blurry and dark. Paul gritted his teeth. He'd have some stern words for whoever it was. It didn't matter what good cause they were raising money for. This behavior was downright rude. He slid the chain off and yanked the door open. "Oh, for goodness sake, what's your prob?" The man behind the door barged through, snarling and screeching. He wore a parka coat with its fur-ringed hood raised. It framed his mess of a face. He had blood smeared all across his skin, and his nose was missing. A window shattered somewhere in the back of the house, and a woman shrieked. Paul's stomach dropped, and he screamed. He grappled with the invader and grabbed a hold of his shoulders. "What?" he grunted. "Let go of me." The man clawed at Paul's shirt. He leaned forward and snapped his teeth. His breath was rotten, and he had bits of ragged meat caught between his teeth. He snarled like a wildcat, and his eyes were white, except for tiny pinpricks of blackness in the center. He flinched backwards from the bites. It was almost as if the maniac wanted to bite his nose off, too, as revenge for losing his own. Whatever was wrong with him, drugs, he guessed. He was dangerous, and Paul had to stop him. Paul grabbed the nearest thing from the shelf on the wall, an animatronic snowman. He smacked the madman across the face with it. Jingle Bell Rock played from the crappy speakers, and the snowman started to boogie. Paul hit the man with it again and again. "Get out! Get out!" The man recoiled from each blow of the rubber decoration. He snarled and shrieked, backing away through the front door as Paul struck him. At some point, something mechanical cracked inside the snowman. The song came out slurred and slow. Jack Frost danced slower. One arm snapped off, and his head dented inwards. Blood smeared across his white body. Adrenaline surged through Paul's veins, reminding him of how it felt to be a young man. He became aware of his battle cry as he fought the mauled lunatic out of his home. With the noseless man wobbling on the threshold, Paul landed a kick into the guy's gut. "And stay out!" he roared. The man went sprawling backwards over the Reyes' front steps. He clattered into a heap at the foot of their driveway. At the top of the driveway staggered a group of people. 2 men and 4 women. Each had various ghastly wounds, like the noseless assailant. A cheek torn open here, an eye gouged out there. Intestines spilt out of one woman's belly and trailed behind her like a bridal train. Across his small patch of lawn in front of the lounge windows, A woman with one arm shambled towards him. Paul's nerves turned to liquid, and his legs to jelly. He whimpered and felt his bladder threaten to release. He scrambled for the door, missed, found the handle, and slammed it shut. With shaking hands, he slid the chain back across, his fingers slaked with gore. Jesus, 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 he whispered to himself. Immediately, the door began to bang again, and so did the windows looking into the lounge, and the screams from the back of the house continued, high-pitched and terrified. Goose flesh rippled up all over Paul's body. These nutcases had surrounded the house. He had no idea what they wanted, but he guessed it wasn't a cup of cocoa. He pushed off from the vibrating door and strode towards the sound of the commotion. He brandished his decoration/weapon. Rose, in the kitchen, some of the attackers had smashed their way through the windows. The glass sliced their forearms to ribbons, but they didn't care. They were trying to pull Rose out by her hair. She shrieked and kicked and batted at the hands to no avail. Several of their guests stood by and watched, their faces drawn in a rictus of shock. They still held their alcoholic beverages. Sean from next door had gone white, and his beer was tipping and spilling on the kitchen tiles. Paul froze. Rose had always argued about getting double glazing, but he'd deferred. He now wished he'd listened to his wife. How long until the front windows, looking out onto the lawn, shattered under the strain? He slapped himself across the face and raced into the fray, swinging Frosty for all his worth. He smacked at the hands that snaked through the glass over and over and over again. "Get off my wife, you damn hooligans." That broke the paralysis spell over the others. The kitchen became a flurry of activity as people dropped drinks and grabbed a hold of Rose. Gail Clark yanked on Rose's feet, pulling her back into the house. In his vest and tie combo, Sean lobbed his pint glass through the window with a violent yell. The claws clutching Rose weakened enough for her to break away. Rosemary collapsed to the floor, sobbing. She held her hands to the blotchy red patches of yanked-out hair. Paul's mind was a flurrying snowstorm of thought. He stood in the kitchen, chest heaving. He stared out at the people gathered in his back garden. "Zombies," he said, not quite believing himself. "They're goddamn zombies." The swaying figures closed in on the house. Bangs and clangs echoed from the front. The dim winter light faded as the bodies blocked out the windows. They moaned in a chorus of the dead, their bloodied hands slapping against the four walls. Someone asked, "What do we do, Paul?" I don't," a woman screeched. "They're coming down the fireplace." An ice shard speared through Paul's core. and the world seemed to slow. "Sweet baby Jesus," he mumbled. An enormous thud shook the foundations of the house. The survivors staggered to the walls for support. Paul shook his head clear. He tightened his grip on Frosty and ran for the lounge. He skidded to a halt as a cloud of coal dust settled across the room, coating the furniture and the tree. The hell? The smog cleared to reveal a massive man in a red and white suit. He kneeled, fists on either side, like the Terminator from that Schwarzenegger flick. A large brown sack slung over his shoulder. He had heavy-duty black boots, and a Santa hat clung to his head. Paul's insides shriveled. He'd fought off the one at the door because they'd been roughly the same size. But this one? No chance. He tried to speak, but found that all the spit had evaporated from his mouth. Only a tiny mouse-like squeak came from his vocal cords. The giant looked up. His eyes sparkled above two rosy cheeks. The orbs looked normal. No cataractic whiteness, narrowing to a black pinprick. A big, thick, white, bushy beard sprouted from his face. Paul dropped the damaged Frosty, which bounced to the laminate wooden floor. His head spun like he'd taken a right hook to the dome. "Santa?" Paul whimpered. Santa smiled, but the smile was fleeting. "Yes, Paul, it is me. Do not be afraid." He glanced at the window, which showed the growing horde pressing against it. "But you should be afraid of those naughty boys and girls." Paul's heart hammered high up in his chest, like a hummingbird trapped in his torso. His brain kept rifling through facts and thoughts as if to make sense of it all. His old thinker kept coming up short. It threw its cards in the air and searched through the rubble again. "What?" He licked his lips. "What do we do?" Santa grinned and stood up. He was 8 feet tall and towered over Paul and the others. If he were any taller, he wouldn't be able to stand upright in this house. He chuckled a deep, throaty laugh. "Ho, ho, ho." It rumbled through the earth like a bear's growl. Santa unslung his sack and upended it onto the living room floor. Machetes, blades, baseball bats, cricket bats, axes and chainsaws, swords and knives, flamethrowers and guns, even a grenade, and armor. It looked like police riot gear, except it had the symbol of a snowflake. "I have brought you well-behaved children, some toys to play with." Paul regained some of his lost nerve at the sight of the armory. With this elf-like giant on their side, they could turn the tides of battle. He bent down and picked up a chainsaw. "Groovy," Santa bowed. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have a few 100,000 more homes to equip for the coming siege." Out beyond the front window, a reindeer with a red nose was fighting off zombies with its antlers. It was winning. Paul felt like someone had punched the wind out of him. His eyes darted from Santa to the fireplace. "You mean you won't stay? Won't stay and fight? We won't last without you. I am afraid there are others who need me." Santa raised one gloved finger. "Remember, Paul, jealousy and greed are very naughty." He gestured to the treasure hoard on the ground. "I brought you these because you have all been good. Let us keep it that way. Will you at least tell us why this is happening?" Santa narrowed his eyes. "When there is no more room in ho-ho hell, the dead will walk the earth." And with that, he vanished back up the chimney in the blink of an eye. In the background, the glass front window started to crack. A lightning bolt fault line zigzagged. Paul revved the chainsaw and beckoned his friends and family. "Let's do this. Everyone, arm yourselves. Rose, stay behind me. Put some armor on." Gail picked up a spear and donned a helmet. She pulled up alongside Paul and jabbed at the air between them and the fracturing window. A flurry of movement in the distance showed that Rudolph was still fending off the zombies. Gail screeched. "Jesus is the only zombie we allow this time of year." Paul took the lead and strode forward, chainsaw in front like a jouster. Sean drew alongside with a shotgun. He pumped it, and 2 red shells bounced to the Reyes' rug. Sean had a steely look in his eyes that Paul had never seen before. He didn't even know the man could handle a gun. "The only thing we should be eaten is turkey." The window gave way, and the zombies flooded in. Paul raised the growling chainsaw and went to battle. Rest in peace on earth. Diary of a serial killer. How might one endure the silent and secluded nature of winter? Be the bear. Enter a deep cave and dream, dream, dream. Jacqueline Suskin. I probably shouldn't be writing this, but oh fucking well. When the most precious thing lodged in your heart is ripped out and crushed by an unthinking alcoholic asshole driving with a revoked license, you do things, unimaginable things, and not just burying your beloved 8-year-old son, which was not on my shitty life bingo card, OVS, but life wasn't shitty before. The word should be capitalized. Before. No, better yet, the before, because now life was rent in 2, forever separated by the gaping maw of rage. The before and the after. A fissure of overwhelming grief that quickly cracked, allowing the steaming, boiling lava to emerge from her core. Oh, he would pay. That drunken dickhead. His money won't protect him. Not from me. They gave her the code name Mama Bear. But he never imagined that she was holed up in a cave. On a hunch, he came out to the Pennsylvania woods at night. Alone. Common sense and the FBI handbook would label his actions reckless at best and suicidal at worst. But he didn't fear for his safety. Mama Bear targeted a certain type of prey. Except for being a male, he didn't fit her profile. Funny. They were both profilers. October snuck up behind him, picking up the crisp air, tossing it around. Playing offense, it switched tactics, threw it toward his face, temporarily snatching his breath. He continued to climb, quiet, crunching under his boots, allowing the patches of clearing and the light of the frosted full moon to guide his steps. He'd reach the cave no matter what, so the easy way was the best way. He put his hand in his front pocket, felt the crumpled page of a diary. The paper crinkled like the fallen leaves underfoot. It was mailed to him at his office. This one, and the other entries. He had the sense to turn in the others, but not this one. Well, most of the others. She vowed to herself that she would abstain from killing for a month. Or so she wrote. By his accounts, it was day 30. He hoped her undated entry referred to October. At least he would have a day, one day. It was easier than I thought. I would say too easy. But that motherfucker mowed down my baby like a shirtless, beer-bellied jickoff hurrying to cut the grass before the Buccos game. Maybe it shouldn't be hard. Justice shouldn't be hard. Not in the semblance of a fair world. Leaves skittered and scurried around his legs, tumbling over each other like playing squirrels. He stopped, inhaled deeply. He loved the smell of fall, that last exhale of trees mixing with ripe decomposition. I'm so glad I live in a world of Octobers. He smiled at the memory of his sister, quoting Anne Shirley. Not so long ago, his smile fell. Not so long ago, yet forever ago. Tragedy has a way of altering time, elongating some parts and compressing others. He looked up through the lattice of bare limbs, a web of gnarled fingers, the indigo sky stitched with rhinestones. Did the stars foretell it? It was the mutable signs of the zodiac: Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, BTK, Dahmer, Bundy, the ones born at the end of a season, not in the middle, like the fixed signs, like Scorpio, like her. You'd think one was enough, but it wasn't. I realized AA, alcoholic asshole, was just one of many. Sure, I settled my score, but what of the other moms? So many blights, diseases walking the earth, infecting others with their cruelty, their carelessness, their capriciousness. Someone had to bring order, just like Melville Dewey did to book classification. Sewn to 99. He considered turning around to walk back down the hill. He turned, but didn't move. In the distance, the twinkling lights of downtown Pittsburgh weaved a terrestrial constellation of bridges, one-way traffic, and sundry skyscrapers. The Steel City, just like its people. Metal backbones, gritty guts, and honest hearts. He craved a sandwich from Primanti's. Any sandwich. That was the last time he saw her. At Primanti's, the original one. He wasn't one to second-guess himself. His mom drummed it into their heads from the cradle. Trust self first, last and only. First, last, only. Thanks to the internet and social media, it's not hard to find someone or their misdeeds. What was once relegated to a diary like this is now vomited onto Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for all to see. Many lap it up, probably because it makes them feel less uncomfortable about their own stupid decisions and meaningless lives. Here for the mindless braggart. Many blowhards make for less research when it comes to this side gig. He cracked his neck, onward and upward, one foot in front of the other, crunching leaves, whipping wind, snapping twigs. Up, up, up he climbed. He was getting close. His hand reached towards his front pocket. Again, he read the page dozens of times, just like the rest. He couldn't help it. Just touching the decal-edged diary page brought clarity and understanding. He had to find her first. Could it be that easy? I think this might be my last entry. I knew it was a bad idea. No, make that bad idea to write things down. But writers write. Fish swim, birds fly, dogs bark. Writers write. And mama bears? Well, unless you're bent from birth, looking at you, mutable signs, no one sets out to be a killer. Or, as I like to differentiate, a remover. Scrooge, Dickens, had it partly right. Decrease the surplus population. He just needed to add of assholes. Decrease the surplus population of assholes. Dangerous, foul, hollow assholes. He neared the ridge. He was getting close. He pulled out the wrinkled diary page. He couldn't help it. The moon illuminated the page, but he couldn't make out the words. Strange glyphs, occultic squiggles, just like those found on the astrological charts she used to interpret. Meaningless symbols to the untrained eye, but metaphysical gold to the mystic. He didn't need to be able to read the entry. He had it memorized, the cave. He could see the entrance, dark, yawning, an inky maw, just like her rage. He reached into the other pocket for his flashlight. She beat him to it. Her flashlight shone on the ground ahead, so as not to blind him. Hey, sis. Hey, bro. What took you so long?